The cure for the abyss is to disconnect your investment in the tiny socially constructed ideal of the Uber culture and invest in connecting with the people in your immediate community who care about your well-being as much as you care about theirs, who will come and provide you with resources and remind you that you deserve those resources and care and time and safety just as you are, without needing to make any changes, that you already belong. You already conform to what they need and want and expect in terms of you being a trustworthy, valuable, lovable person.
Welcome to Enrichment for the Real World, the podcast devoted to improving the quality of life of pets and their people through enrichment. We are your hosts, Allie Bender.
And I'm Emily Strong.
And we are here to challenge and expand your view of what enrichment is, what enrichment can be, and what enrichment can do for you and the animals in your lives. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Enrichment for the Real World. And I want to thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right. Tell us your name, your pronouns, and your pets.
My name is Amelia Nagoski. My pronouns are she, they. I have 2 dogs, both rescues, one named Lucy, who is a maybe blue tick coonhound, and a larger white, probably Pyrenees mix named Sadie.
Tell us your story and how you got to where you are.
Well, I think I'm here today because I am co-author of a book called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, which is very odd because I actually am a conductor. I have conservatory training as a classical musician. And during my doctoral degree in conducting, while I was getting that, I ended up in the hospital twice with pain that doctors were like, well, this is stress-induced. You need to relax. But luckily, I have a twin named Emily Nagoski, who is already famous for her first New York Times bestselling book, Come As You Are, The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life. So she has a doctorate in public health and is an expert in women's wellness. So when I was hospitalized with what turned out to be stress-induced pain, I mean, I don't mean like I went to the emergency room because I was having a panic attack. I mean, I had abdominal pain so bad I thought I was going to die, and I ended up being kept in the hospital for 4 days. So I was truly, genuinely sick. When I say stress, I don't mean like some imaginary pressure. I mean my body was under strain that it could not keep me living my regular life. So Emily came to the hospital and just presented me basically with peer-reviewed research about what stress does to your body. And I was like, wait a minute, stress and other emotions happen in your body? And she's like, you didn't know that? Because like you're a musician and your job as a conductor is to embody emotions. And I was like, wait a minute, but if all the emotions are in my body like my whole life, I've had all these emotions in my body my whole life. And it's really hard to look back at the time. It was way over 30 years of mostly rage that I had suppressed and denied. And it inflamed systems in my body that harmed me physically.
I have no idea what that's like. Our podcast listeners have never heard me soapbox rant about the many things that induce rage in my life.
Yeah, Emily thought that my story was an extreme illustration. But once we wrote Burnout and started talking to people who read the book, especially women, we heard case after case of women saying, I just got out of the hospital. The doctors told me it was stress. Like, it's so much more common than people are aware, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just going to sidebar a bit and say the medical community is improving, and also it still has a long way to go in terms of not giving patients news in a dismissive way. So like my mom had a similar thing where she had like really bad arrhythmias throughout her 30s and 40s. And the doctors kept telling her, it's just stress. It's just stress. And they were using the word just. And she was like, stop ignoring this problem. I'm going to die. Like she was so afraid for her life. And then she finally found a doctor who was like, they're not wrong. They're just not explaining it to you. And they're just, the use of the word just is dismissive. Here is how stress impacts your health and why stress is causing these arrhythmias. And you are telling me that you live a life of chronic stress. And so your medical team is making that assessment accurately, but dismissing it to you so that you don't understand how your stress is impacting you and causing these scary things, and also what you can do about it.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem is that physicians don't know what to do about it. They have no idea how to manage stress. They were never taught in their lives how to manage stress. They are all burning out at unprecedented rates also because they don't know. The advice that I was given was literally, just relax. You need to relax. You need to reduce your stress. Okay, I was a full-time doctoral student commuting 65 miles each way to and from school, working 3 other part-time jobs, and step-parent to 3 teenagers. Like, just relax. Reduce your stress. No, how? Yeah. So, I learned the good news that you don't have to be out of a stressful situation before you start to manage the stress that's happening in your body and feel better, which means that you can start to feel better so that you can start to manage the external things that are causing the stress in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, knowing that you are a conductor makes you just even cooler than you already were. That's amazing. But also, yeah, how did you do that? How did you pull that off?
Becoming a conductor or becoming a conductor who writes about stress?
No. Everything that you just said, like you were doing all of these things at the same time. And obviously it didn't, it, it, it went sideways real bad for you. And then learning from your sister, about how stress impacts the body, learning that didn't make all of those life pressures go away. So how did you?
Thing one was accepting the notion that emotions are not some theoretical thing that exists out with the platonic ideals. The emotions are cycles that happen in your body. And that I had been denying and repressing a lot of feelings, especially negative ones like rage and grief, for decades. So accepting that I had emotions in my body and I had to let myself feel them. I had to dig around and find them and then let myself move all the way through them, because emotions, as a metaphor, are like tunnels. You have to move all the way through the darkness to get to the light at the end, which is a delightful metaphor, but I am not a metaphorical person. I need it to be literally true. How do I do that? So there was a lot of mindfulness meditation, a lot of just navel gazing and therapy, where I'd be like, what, do I have a feeling? Oh, I found a feeling. Okay, also, since the book was published, Emily and I both separately have been diagnosed with autism. Part of my autism that is not part of her autism is alexithymia, which is the clinical inability to notice my internal state. So one of the reasons we had to write Burnout together was that Emily's ability to notice her internal state is supercharged. She cannot ignore her internal signals. And she couldn't believe that I could even be unaware. How do you not know when you're having something happen inside you? And I was like, I just don't. So, and again, we're identical twins, and yet our experiences are so different. So she couldn't have written Burnout alone, and I couldn't have written Burnout alone, because we needed this perspective of just how varied people's experiences are. Anyway, so I started with acknowledging that I have emotions and that they're real physiological things, and letting myself find and feel them, and practicing getting good at noticing my internal experience. And some of this happened through the therapy and the navel gazing and the meditation, but also I started practicing Tai Chi, which was hugely impactful because it gives you kind of a structure and a focus of ways to attend to the internal experience and to move through them and to deal physically with the sensations. So that's how I started. That's the first door I went through to find out what the next door should be.
Amazing. So yeah, Allie and I, so to introduce you to our business, Pet Harmony, Allie and I met first and we worked together at a sanctuary that was traumatic for us in a lot of ways. I mean, there are also a lot of wonderful experiences there, yada, yada. But what we noticed in that environment is that alone, neither of us were fully successful because each of us had kind of complementary skill sets. But when we worked together, we sort of like filled in the blanks for each other and we could be more impactful. And that's how we co-authored our book as well. Neither of us could have written it alone. We definitely needed each other to write the book. So I really resonate with your experience. And then we brought in Ellen as our third business partner when I started having some pretty serious health issues and I couldn't pull my weight. And Ellen introduced us to your book, Burnout, and the podcast, The Feminist Survival Project, which we also love. And so Ellen's the one who sort of like introduced us to you and Emily and everything that you bring to the world. And needless to say, we're all massive fans of your work and we recommend your content to everybody. We run a professional development mentorship program called Pet Pro. And a common thread that we're seeing is people come in. And so for the mentorship program is really about giving you support in every aspect of what it means to be an animal behavior professional and every part of that professional development process. It's not just the training skills or the consulting skills. It's like navigating difficult conversations, your business, your financial mindset, your the logistics, executive functioning, like so like Pet Pro's really, it's not a program, it's a mentorship because it's like, well, what areas do you need support in? And we'll support you in that. And what I find charming about humans in general, but especially like our group in Pet Pro, is how many of them come into the program. They're like, yeah, self-care. I know, like self-care, right? And then when they get into the actual work of like what they need to do to build skills and build confidence and all of that stuff, it becomes like they become acutely aware of how much like, oh yeah, no, self-care, like, oh, taking care of ourselves, like, oh, burnout, like, no, this is real. And actually we do need support in this. And so I like almost everybody, it's like all paths lead to burnout. Like everybody gets there at some point in Pet Pro where we're like, read this book, right?
Like, yay, but also, oh no. Like, I wish we wrote the book in the early 20 teens, mid 20 teens. It came out in 2019, and we put like all these like fun pop culture references in, thinking like this is a book that's going to be useful for a few years, but the world's going to get better. And like now it sort of feels like a little dated because of all the. We didn't know that it would be more relevant as time went on, and like that's real depressing.
Okay. I just find this really delightful because our book also came out in 2019 and we also didn't anticipate it having the longevity that it did. So like lots of parallels here. Yeah, but like it's so like that's the thing is you don't know how much people need your work until you put it out and you get that feedback and you're like, "Oh, this is something a lot of people need." And there's a dearth in resources that like I just showed up and I didn't know how much people were going to need this. But yeah, we all your book is well loved in Pet Pro in our program. And one of the reasons that that's true and that what your work both with the podcast and the book are so impactful is because the animal behavior professions collectively we are a disenfranchised industry. People don't take us seriously. I mean, let's be real, even mental health professions, it's certainly better than it was, but for humans, it's still not super taken seriously. And so for non-humans, that's even less so. Anytime you're doing the non-human version of something, there's an element of like, oh, well, you just work with animals, right? But at the same time, it's a very emotionally heavy and thankless job. And even when it isn't, even when we're appreciated and our clients are like, oh my gosh, you've changed our lives, which is amazing when that happens. It's still a caregiving profession, which means that there's a lot of emotional labor that's happening even when things are ideal, even when things are going well. It's still a high emotional and cognitive load, right? And on top of that, the profession is largely, not entirely, we've got a bunch of great cis men in our industry, but largely our population is cis women and other marginalized genders and other marginalized populations in general, which means that most of us have grown up being told that we don't deserve to charge what our services are worth, that we need to prioritize others over ourselves, we need to work harder than everybody else to get the same sort of level of recognition. So there's just these layers in our industry of things that contribute to the burnout issue and the overwhelm and the overextension, right? And then on top of that, it's an unregulated field, which means that there's a lot of unethical stuff that happens in the name of training. And ironically, most of the people who are the least qualified to do the work are charging astronomical prices, and they're getting paid that money. And those of us who actually know things and do things ethically are afraid to charge for even what our services are worth, much less 10 times their services are worth, right? So there's moral injury on top of everything else, because a lot of times we're cleaning up the messes of unqualified people who can legally do what they're doing, but what they're doing is horrific, right? So burnout is endemic in the field. And there's so much that you and Emily talk about that is applicable. But I would love to really hear your thoughts on that moral injury component, because it can be really difficult to process burnout when a big driving factor is the moral injury that comes from dealing with animal abuse and neglect on a regular basis. And especially when that abuse and neglect is happening within our, like in our ranks, right? It's coming from our own industry. So what additional steps can we take as an industry or as individuals within this industry to complete our stress response cycle and generally just take care of ourselves when we're dealing with burnout that is fueled by moral injury?
If you've listened to this show pretty much at all, you've heard me talk about Oso, the four-legged love of my life. And you know that keeping him active and comfortable as he ages is basically all I talk about on this show at this point. So I am embarrassingly excited to tell you about our affiliate partner, Paw Prosper, because they carry brands I genuinely use every single day. We're talking the Help 'em Up harness, Fit Paws, and Blue 9. The Help 'em Up harness is not optional in our house. Multiple times a day, Oso gets suited up so we can help him safely navigate the back stairs to go outside. Honestly, at this point, he just like shows up at the door and waits because he knows the drill. He just stands there and lets me don his outfit. It's part of how we move through the day together, and I cannot imagine life without it. We've also built out his enrichment plan with the Blue 9 Propel Air platform and the Fit Paws Cavaletti set. Yes, my dog has a physical therapy routine to rival my own, and I have zero regrets about that. If fitness and mobility matter for your dog, and it matters for all of them really, go check out petharmonytraining.com/fitness. That's petharmonytraining.com/fitness to see all that Paw Prosper has to offer. Your future self is going to thank you. Oso would thank you too, but he's busy waiting by the back door to go outside.
So much of that experience is relatable to me as a musician, because there is in the music industry very much a feeling of audiences feel like you should be grateful just to have any work at all. And how dare you charge me $200 an hour to do a thing that all you have to do is show up. It doesn't even take any work for you because it's so easy and you love it, right? It's barely even work for you. Like, there's definitely a sense of that. Like, also I was a public school teacher, so same.
The moral injury runs deep in that field as well.
Yeah. So I really get it. So I also want to say that everything in Burnout is applicable to, and it's based in research that is done on people who are at kind of a standard baseline of mental health. I would say that the experience of moral injury is a kind of trauma. It's really intense. It is more intense than a standard, typical life experience. And I would say that requires some professional assistance. That requires therapy. That requires, at minimum, I think, group therapy of like at least talking to other people who are experiencing it so you don't feel like you're experiencing it alone, which is kind of outside the scope of what we had to focus Burnout on something. So the stuff that has to do with trauma is a little bit tangential. We include some information about like, if you have trauma, it might be more difficult in this ways. And I think that if you're experiencing this kind of moral injury, that the label of trauma applies to you, even though that might be hard to hear. And you're like, no, it's not that bad. Most people who experience trauma feel like, oh no, it's not that bad. Other people have it worse. And yeah, other people have it worse, but that doesn't mean that what you're experiencing isn't trauma. So seek professional resources and the kind of resources that are required for people who experience trauma. That's thing number one. But thing number two is to recognize that the thing that initiates stress in your body is a separate thing that you can deal with in a separate process from the process you use to deal with the stress that happens in your body. The events that initiate a stress response kind of in a little mental box, in a little closet in your mind, and you instead focus on the sensations that are happening in your body. If you have experienced trauma, it may be that your body says, no, that's way too much. I can't experience that. You might need to like take a little bite of that and say, I'm just going to focus on this one level and deal with it piece by piece and be content with a very slow pace as you gradually, complete layers, like shallow layers, one at a time, very slowly and gradually, of the stuff that's built up in you. And when I say stuff that's built up in you, I mean like every time you see a terrible thing happen, you witness an injustice, stress responses occur in your brain. And when you're working in a field where that happens multiple times a day, it's going to build up fast and hard. So dealing with the stress just a little bit at a time and remembering that tiny incremental improvement is incredibly valuable. So if you don't feel, you go for a run every day for your week and you're like, I don't feel any better. I mean, do you feel literally 0 better? Or do you feel like you've gone from a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10 to like a 1.5? Because that's progress. And you probably feel like a 1.5. You're just not satisfied with that because you're like, I need so much relief right now. Sometimes it just doesn't come that fast, especially if the stress is very deep and old and repeated like that. There was a thing number 2 I was going to say, but I forgot what it was because I lost track.
I've never done that before. I have no idea what that's like.
I'm sure it'll come to me eventually. But yeah, so it's go a little bit at a time, separate, understand that you're separating the stress itself that's happening in your body from the thing that initiated your stress, and carrying with you all the time the mental load of like, this terrible thing happened. How can I get over this? How can I move on? How can I be a human being in the world where this other stuff is also in this world? You can fully be a human being who feels well in a world where terrible things are also true. And I can prove that's true because you didn't used to feel so terrible. And it wasn't because there wasn't horrible things in the world. It's because you were not deeply personally connected to them yet. And the degree to which you are personally connected to the bad stuff is a choice you can make. You can manage how much of that you're exposed to. This is the other thing I was going to say. So you're controlling how you deal with the stress in your body and having realistic expectations about how much progress is possible, at what pace that progress is possible. And you're also dealing with how much exposure you have to those things. And you think, I can't limit my exposure to that. The world is an unjust place and I must take responsibility for the blah, blah. You don't have to do that. You get to choose.
Yeah. I hope it's not rude for me to bring up somebody else's book in our interview, but if you've ever read Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit, she takes I felt so attacked by the book. Like, she takes us to task because she's like, if you are harming yourself because you're constantly throwing yourself in harm's way because you're trying to affect change, like, that's not it. It's ego, essentially. Like, you are choosing to self-destruct because you feel like you have to be the hero in the situation, and if you're not involved, then it's not going to be fixed. And I was like, ouch, but okay. Like, so she was like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a multi-generational process. Like, you have to take care of yourself so that you can stay in it, even if that means that there are parts of it that you won't show up on the newspaper photos or whatever. You know what I mean? And that was like a slap in the face, but it was one that I needed, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a great resource for people who are like, I can't stop paying attention to the news, to the terrible, awful things, and the world is on fire. And if I disconnect, then I'm being irresponsible. That's a message that we receive from the people who produce news shows and media, because they want us to stay, they want us to feel fearful and also bad, because our bad feelings keep us latched in, which is how they sell us soap, basically, or prescription medication or whatever's on the commercials. That's what those media are for selling ads. And their strategy to do that is to make us feel bad. If we don't turn that dial, more coming up next. Oh my God, turn the dial. You don't need to know the rest. You know enough. You're good.
Yeah, I really struggled with like the balance between self-care and still staying aware of what's happening so I can be aware of ways in which I need to resist, right? And my own personal technique that I discovered is helpful for me is I subscribe to the AP News like news alerts in my email, and then if I read the headline when it shows up in my inbox. I read the headline, and if I'm like, I don't ever need to know more about this, I delete it right away. If I look at it and I'm like, this feels like urgent, like I should read this right now, I'll open it, I'll read it, and then I'll pause to go complete my stress response cycle. If it's something that I'm like, I can tell that I do need to be informed about this, and right now I do not have the reserves to handle this without self-destructing. I have a folder that I put it into that's like, engage with this later when you have the bandwidth and you have the time to fully process. And that has been the most successful technique that I have found for myself to stay informed while also like setting boundaries around it so that it's not consuming me. And I don't think I would have come up with that strategy if I had not read Burnout. So thank you for, I mean, I know that you didn't directly give me that idea, but like you gave me the framework to think about how to strike that balance between staying informed and taking care of myself. And so I just appreciate that you helped me find that solution for myself.
That is a question we get a lot, actually. People responding to the book being like, okay, well, how do I mean, the world's on fire. How do I manage the news while I'm, trying to deal with the stress that happens in my body as a result of the news? The perspective that I like to give is the one really that Burnout is based on, which is the kind of evolutionary perspective. So for tens of millions of years, people who were humans and proto-humans evolved in an environment where they know what's happening immediately around them, and really that's it. And that's been true until about the Industrial Revolution, which, I mean, if all of human history is the length of your arm spread wide, fingertip to fingertip, the Industrial Revolution is like half of your final fingertip, right? So in all of human history, only in this tiny sliver of time have we been exposed a lot to news from places where it's not of immediate impact to us. We are not evolved to be aware of the war in Ukraine going on for years. Like, that is just not a thing that humans are equipped with evolutionarily. We don't have capacity for that. We weren't given it because we never needed it. And you still don't need it. Like, be aware of the war in Ukraine. Absolutely. That's the extent of your responsibility here. Unless it's literally your job to end the war in Ukraine, in which case, good luck to you. Please complete your incomplete stress response cycles. But for everybody else, which is almost everyone in the world except for like a handful of people, you don't have to stay connected and involved. The things that your body can handle, is designed to handle, are the things that are happening in your immediate community. So stay focused on that level. The only reason you think that you need to be engaged with world news is because news shows want to create content that is universally important, right? Like MSNBC is not going to sell ad time if they talk about the, municipal trash collection problems in one neighborhood of one city. But you know what? That's the level of intensity that our bodies are designed to handle. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's that maintaining awareness of what you do and do not have control over, and really the limits of our control for things like, what's happening in the Middle East right now and the war in Ukraine and injustices in Asia, the 5 genocides that are currently happening simultaneously around the world, right? The only control that we have over that is voting for people who will make better decisions about how we as a country engage with that. And like maybe like donating supplies to some organization if you have that availability, right? So like it's really about emotional budgeting. Like if I give my time and energy and grief to this thing that I have no control over, will I have enough time, energy, and bandwidth to actually make an impact where I do have control? And that it's really hard. It feels, I mean, at least for me, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, that was a really hard lesson to learn because it felt almost like a cop out, like, oh, I'm just giving myself permission to like not pay attention to other people's suffering. And it really took me a long time to realize I can't reduce harm where I have the ability to reduce harm if I am sending myself into a pit of despair because I'm focusing on all of the harm that I have no control over. So I'm actually less impactful when I hyper focus on stuff I can't control.
Exactly. And this is chapter 2 in Burnout, is managing things you can and cannot control when the stressors. So chapter 1 is dealing with the stress in your body. Chapter 2 is dealing with things that initiate stress response cycles in your body. And you divide those things into 2 categories: stressors you can control and stressors you can't control. And when it comes to like feeling the pain of the Sudanese or the Palestinians, like you can't do anything about that. Your body's not equipped to handle that. If it feels good to make a contribution to an organization who is handling that, by all means. The thing that Burnout, the book, is about is handling your own experience, making your experience better, making yourself healthier, more resilient, more capable of what you want to be capable of, ready for whatever comes next without being, feeling like you've a tube of toothpaste squeezed until you have nothing left and then discarded. It's your individual experience. And you can, locally, within your family, chosen family or birth family or whatever you've got, deal with the pain of the people around you. And when you turn to them and they turn to you with equal shared care, that personal connection and engagement is the way you can tell your body that it's this personal connection of human to human, especially when we share co-presence, physical presence with each other. That's how our bodies feel like, I am contributing. That's the way to make yourself feel like you've done something to help other people, when it's a visceral, immediate action. Does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, that really aligns with my lived experience of like how multiple people have asked me how I've been able to stay in something for as long as I have, or do that, whatever the questions are, which has been, they're varied because people are varied. But in answering the question, it's always like I focus on what I can control, not on what I can't control. I am really strict with my emotional budget. I mean, let's be real, I'm more strict with my emotional budget than my financial budget. So I've got some growth to do there.
I don't think you're alone in that, yeah.
Like I really like that phrase from Rebecca Solnit's book about like that this is the work of generations, not of a lifetime, has been life changing for me because it means that I don't have to right now in this moment see the impact of the work I'm doing. I just have to focus on the way that I'm the tiny changes that I'm seeing and the gratitude and the connection, the relationships that I'm building, the network I'm building, the community I'm building because of how I show up for people that I can impact. That's just kind of the recurring theme. It's like I don't have as much capacity as I did when I was younger. I can't be as impactful as I was then, and I'm not sweating that because I'm just doing what I can when I can, and everything else is beyond my control.
My guess is that you probably didn't have that much capacity when you were young either. You were just accustomed to overextending yourself and had not yet paid the price.
I think it's a little from column A and a little from column B because
But for young people listening, thinking like, this is the time of my life when I could like pour out my heart. No.
yeah, please don't. Yeah. We jokingly say that the unofficial tagline of Pet Pro is "We messed up, so you don't have to."
Yes. When I like, if I were to blur burnout, it would be, please let my suffering not have been in vain.
Right, exactly. So like, yeah, young people listening, don't think you have to go out and work 80 hours a week like I did. But like, so part of it was I had no concept of capacity. Like Emily, I had no, like I had terrible interoception, and I had to learn interoception over time with therapy and an occupational therapist and dietitian. Like I had a lot of people who had to help me with interoception, but right, professionals who had to help me learn interoception as a skill because I'm ADHD. I didn't understand myself when I was younger, so I did overextend myself a lot. And also I could get away with it, whereas now I can't get away with it because my chronic illnesses are, my body's deteriorating over time and faster than like an able-bodied person because my chronic illnesses are like aggressively eating away at my capacity, right? So like it's a little bit of both. Like I could get away with it, and also I shouldn't have gotten away with it even then because I did a lot of harm to myself, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have long COVID now and I have for 6 years. So the impact of physical ability on emotional capacity they're the same thing. They're not like separate things. So when you're measuring your emotional budget, your physical budget is the same budget. They're different line items maybe, but they cannot exist independent of each other.
Yeah, we've updated the spoon theory metaphor to be a silverware drawer theory now because you can be out of spoons but still have plenty of forks or knives. And I was born with an abundance of knives and not that many spoons and forks, so I just get
That's
stabby
what I was
a lot.
thinking. I'm like, I have so many knives.
It's so many knives. Not that many spoons or forks, though.
Right. No, I had a lot of spoons, and now I've got like 2 spoons. I still have a big stack of knives.
Yeah, the knives will be with me till I die. They're never rusting. But yeah, I mean that it's true though. Like you can be completely depleted in one aspect and still have reserves in another facet of brain body connection and I don't know, I can't think of the word right now, but like showing up and being able to do things, capacity, that's the word. But like, like you still have to pay attention to that because like I realized that like there's certain activities that I do as a part of my job that deplete cognitive capacity. And then I was trying to go do cognitive fun things with friends and just melting down. And I realized it's because I've already spent all of my cognitive capacity spoons, and then I'm trying to show up with all I've got left as forks and knives, and that goes really poorly. And then people are like, Emily, why are you here? Like, if you're not having a good time. And I'm like, because I thought I would have a good time. I wanted to have a good time. but I couldn't assess that I had no reserve. Just because I had physical energy left didn't mean that I had cognitive energy left.
Yeah. Sometimes instead of a board game, you need to go play skee ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Or literally for me, curl up in fetal position under a weighted blanket with a cup of hot tea and watch just like a mindless show because I have no brain left.
Right. Yeah. But you still want to have some like nice feelings. Yeah.
So I feel like that's like we've kind of drifted into something that I was going to ask you about anyway, which is like when we are just under a constant, never ending stream of stressors because, gestures at everything. How do you engage in the marathon in a way that supports yourself? And I think you've said a lot of nuggets already, but is there anything that you want to add, like understanding that this is a marathon, not a sprint, that this is the work of multiple generations, that human behavior and world events are cyclical, so like even it's not even some of it isn't even the work of generations, it's just always going to be the work because humans are humans. And knowing all of that can be, at least for me, has in the past been really depressing when I have that realization that like we're just repeating history over and over again. And so that has reduced my capacity, just this idea of like, oh, this isn't a linear progress where we're just moving forward. It's just cyclical, like brushing your teeth. Like you just have to keep fighting off the dental bacteria, right? And like that's also true on like social movement levels, human rights levels. Sorry, perimenopause is just messing with my ability to retrieve words.
For me, because I started perimenopause only slightly before I got long COVID, which also gave me like intense brain fog. So my capacity to words is
Words are hard. I lost it. It's gone. I don't even.
I think we were talking about how the arc of history bends toward justice, but it's a very long arc and very slow. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Was beautiful. Yeah. Keep going.
I remembered one of the stories, like images we use in the book to describe how this feels is if you imagine you're standing on the shoreline trying to move the beach and all you have is a bucket. That's going to feel completely overwhelming and impossible. But you're doing it anyway because you feel like it's important. And then you look to your left and to your right, and there's a whole line of people all the way down the shore, and they are also moving with their buckets. But even more importantly is you look behind you, and there's a whole crowd of people who don't have the buckets right now, but they're waiting to take over. When you lose the capacity and you can't do it anymore because you're gonna lose it eventually. You cannot keep going forever. That's a physical impossibility. But because they all know that this is not possible for one person to do forever, they're waiting to take over, to take their turns, and you hand them the bucket and you go to the back of the line and you have a rest while somebody else does the thing. That's how it's supposed to work. And in fact, that is how it works. We just have to remember, like you were saying with the Rebecca Solnit's perspective, is like, we are not the hero. And our whole culture worships the lone genius, the individual hero who's the Sherlock Holmes who solves the problem, the one who does it. But that is a myth. It doesn't exist. The way humanity solves problems is with cooperation, with group and community cooperation. That's Jonathan Haidt, the research psychologist, described humans as 90% chimp, 10% bee. We are not built to do great things alone. We're built to do them together, which anybody who's done, I think, the work that you've done or is even interested in that kind of like way of doing work knows from experience that when good stuff gets done, it's because people work together, not because some lone hero rode in on a horse.
Yeah, yeah. I have so much salt about the hero worship like mentality and culture, and that ire is not directed at anybody who experiences hero worship. It is directed at the culture that has taught them that hero worship is an appropriate response to things. And it's been really hard for me because when our book came out, we weren't expecting people to care about it. And then it unexpectedly became a bestseller in our industry. Not a New York Times bestseller, okay, but like within our industry. And I've had so many people approach me with kind of a hero worship mentality. And I've really struggled with like, I want to support you and I want to make you feel loved and cared for and seen. And also take me off your pedal. Like, what are you doing? I'm not a hero. Like have you been reading anything we've been saying? It's about community. It's about like, it's about evidence. It's about, we don't do cult of personality here. And it's been really hard for me. I've had to learn how to be gracious and grateful and warm and supportive and just set aside my feelings for the moment about hero worship. But it's why we're in the position we're in. And I don't just mean right now, I mean like in history, cyclically, we get to where we are because of the hero worship thing. And, you know, the cult of personality will lead all of us off a ledge over and over and over again. And so like, I understand why people are drawn towards that, because our culture and many other cultures in human history have taught people that you are powerless and you are meaningless and you're just a cog in the machine, and you need to like worship the person who's like the superhero. And I hate that people feel that about themselves, believe that about themselves, and believe that somebody else should be worshipped, right? Because that's how people stay in charge, is they convince the masses that they have no power.
Yeah, there is a long history in conducting, as being, you know, orchestral and choral conductors. There's a long history of the expectation that a conductor is the leader, the one in charge. And actually, there is a definite culture of musicians, especially amateur musicians, who want the conductor to be angry daddy. You know, spank me daddy, I've been a bad boy. Because they don't trust someone. They don't trust their authority unless that person is authoritative in like a real old-fashioned, like Victorian big man kind of way, like robber baron sort of, you all suck and I'm better than you, and I can prove that because I'm the one here who's standing on this podium. And as a, you know, someone who was assigned female at birth, standing on a podium for me, and also from what I've actually learned about humanity and from the making of art, I know that people who are not feeling fear, who are not just doing what they're told, people who spontaneously have their own desire to express and be and sing and play and experience the music. And this is a metaphor, so, you know, I think those people who feel their own impetus to act cooperatively in a group, that's how the great performances are made. Not because, you know, some dumbass stands on a podium and waves their arms in an eccentric way. And I think a lot of people who observe conductors believe that that's what conductors are doing, is that they are being, you know, because you stand there and you're big, you're the one the audience sees. So everyone thinks that you're the one doing this. When in fact, and again, this is a metaphor, when in fact the thing that the conductor is doing, and they are just as significant a part of the machine as each individual instrumentalist. Everybody's equal. And the thing that's in charge is the music itself. And everyone's efforts come in service of the music. And this is a metaphor. So the music is whatever the thing that's important to you is. Social justice, or service, or life itself, or the expression of love, the whatever that thing is. We all exist in cooperative groups. And unfortunately, history has been framed as conductors making decisions and telling us all what to do, and them being the heroes who we worship. And that is just not how it has ever worked. And only, I think, really, if we're speaking literally of conductors, the only conductors who are really like that, who are a little mean and condescending and give like strict instructions and want everyone just to do what they're told, those are bad conductors. Those are conductors who don't have real training. They're pretending to be a thing that they perceive to be true. And now when we make that a metaphor, the people who are leaders, who are the, you know, the spank me daddy leaders, are not leading from a place of competence. They're leading from a place of pretense. So actual really great leaders understand that this is what they're doing is helping shape cooperation. Did any of that make sense, or was it too music-y?
No. It makes so much sense. And I'll say that, like, we have been telling people for a while that behavior consulting is at its core a project managing profession, because I think a lot of people think you have to be all things to all people. You have to have all the answers for your clients. You have to be able to single-handedly help them reach their goal. And that's what they're aspiring to become. Like, someday I don't ever want to have to, like, get anybody else involved. I want to be able to just come in and be a rock star and, like, help my clients reach their goals. And that is a sign of inexperience if that's your mindset, because a truly experienced behavior consultant is looking at their job as being the advocates for their clients and their pets, and figuring out who else that client needs on their support team in order to get where they need to go, and how do we coordinate between everybody so we're all drawing from the same pool of shared information. And that is exactly what you described. A conductor is also a project manager, because you're not calling the shots. You're making sure that everybody on the team is in good communication with each other, and you're giving them all the opportunity to shine and do their job well. And all you're doing is coordinating other people's efforts and making sure that everybody's working in this case, literal harmony, not just metaphorical harmony.
Or at least purposeful disharmony, if that's the style of music.
Right, depending on the style of music, right? Intentional in coordination.
Just in the big picture, a leader exposes their greatness when they are able to be humble, able to let you know that they don't know a thing. They haven't thought about that yet from that perspective, and they're going to go learn more about it, or they want to know more if you ask them a question, they say, I don't know. Well, first of all, the fact that they can say, I don't know, and admit they don't know something is a very good sign. And then it's even better when they say, what is your perspective? How would you do that? Like, that is, to me, the sign of somebody who's doing a great job with leadership, not somebody who goes, who huffles and buffles and is like, well, I'm going to make something up and pretend that I know, like pretentious asshat. Sorry, was that too far?
Not at all. Delightful. I'm here for it. I want to be your friend.
Well, you already are, so.
Yay! I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm hoping you can at least briefly comment on, we were kind of heading towards what I wanted to ask you anyway with this discussion, because you talk about the abyss as being this gap between who we are and who we're expected to be. And I feel like what we've been talking about really is sort of related to that or connected to that, because that hero worship comes from the belief that, like, I'm not good enough. I'm expected to be a cog, or I'm expected to be subservient, or I'm expected to place other people's needs before my own. All of that, it's all sort of like part and parcel of what we've been talking about, right? So what recommendations do you have for those of us who are in a profession where that is acutely true? I mean, I think it's true everywhere, but I feel like some professions lend itself more to that mindset than others. And it kind of feeds into a lot of weird patterns of behavior in our industry, not just the hero worship, but this idea that you can't question anything, this idea that you have to just always be like positive and like cheerful, and you can never make anybody feel uncomfortable. And like, there's a ripple effect to that. So what advice do you have for people who are not aware of the abyss between who they are and who they can be?
Chasm between who we are and what we're capable of versus what the world tells us we must and would benefit from being is vast for almost everyone, because the world, the Uber culture, expects us to conform to a very narrow, socially constructed ideal, which is rich, in the U.S., white, English-speaking, Christian, cis, straight, educated, speaking English as a first language. Did I mention Christian? Anyway, thin, exactly, able-bodied, neurotypical. The list goes on and on. And the less you conform to that very narrow, socially constructed ideal, literally the more danger you're in. Because remembering that humans are a hive species, a herd species, when you're as part of a herd, where's the safest place to be in that herd? The middle. Because when the lion comes, it's the animals who are literally on the fringes who are going to get chomped. And this, again, digs in deep into our evolutionary heritage. And our bodies know that the safest place to be in a herd is the middle. So when they feel the distinct I don't belong feelings, your body will compel you to conform because that's safer. That's your body protecting you because it understands that as part of a herd, you need to be in the middle. And because for this brand new experience that we have in the 21st century of being exposed to this uber herd that really does contain people who conform to that socially constructed ideal. In fact, those are the people who are promoted on TikTok. Those are the ones who get famous and show us, they want to influence us. They're the influencers. They're the ones who show up in our feed. When if we just look around to the people literally physically around us, there are not so many of those. When we look at the herd, who is our own personal herd, who in the book we call it the bubble of love, the people who care about our well-being as much as we care about theirs, who will turn toward you and remind you that, no, you don't have to be rich, white, cis, thin, English-speaking Christian, neurotypical, able-bodied, English-speaking. They'll remind you that you, as you are part of the herd. You belong to your own little mini herd. You're protected by a bubble of other people who agree that your avocado countertops are just fine. You don't have to have an HGTV kitchen in order to have a place where you and your friends and family gather and share experiences and love and food together. So the cure for the abyss is to disconnect your investment in the tiny socially constructed ideal of the Uber culture and invest in connecting with the people in your immediate community who care about your well-being as much as you care about theirs, who will come and provide you with resources and remind you that you deserve those resources and care and time and safety just as you are, without needing to make any changes, that you already belong. You already conform to what they need and want and expect in terms of you being a trustworthy, valuable, lovable person.
I mean, I think this is true for every type of marginalization, that the power dynamics at play also injure the people who are in power, because they have to maintain this thing that's not good for them either, like this culture, this behavioral repertoire. And it's kind of funny because I surround myself with neurospicy, since I myself am neurospicy. And I know I have a couple of like childhood friends who, I don't like the word neurotypical because I really don't think it's as typical as we're told it is, right? But the
allistic, maybe.
We can go with allistic as like our shorthand, right? But the couple people that were in my life, in my childhood friend circle, that were definitely allistic, felt distress when they were surrounded by my neurospicy friends and me, because they were in our bubble of love. They were the marginalized ones. And what was wild was watching how they tried to compensate. Like, I don't know, because like this like my how I do my makeup, how I wear my clothes, how I talk, how I behave, what I choose, what I care about. In every other context, this is successful for me, and in this context it's not landing, and now I don't know what to do. And watching them try to adjust, I found it fascinating, because it's like, I'm sorry that you feel like who you are isn't enough or isn't correct, and like you're allowed to be allistic. There's nothing wrong with you being allistic, but you have been taught, like socially conditioned from birth, to believe that being different from your group is bad, and you can't, and like you've got all the power here, but because this particular group of people is marginalized, you're getting a taste of what it's like for us everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of when the whole world went on lockdown initially in 2020, I was like, I know the world is suffering and that most people need to be out and connect with other people, but I was thriving like I had never thrived in my life in lockdown. And I know that's because I'm literally not typical. Like I am, my needs and my emotional whatever it was the first time in my life I'd ever had the world structured in a way that conformed to my needs. And I was like, I hope the whole world can learn now what it's like to feel that the world is not structured for your needs, and maybe increase their compassion for the rest of the time when I'm living in their world. Like maybe people will open their minds to the idea that, yeah, it's the way the world's designed, not that you're gifted in some capacity. Yeah, it's not that you're better, it's that you fit.
You were born into a world that was built for you.
It must feel nice. And for like a few months, the world was built for me.
Yeah, I was shocked by how utterly content I was to live in lockdown.
Yeah. Whereas my husband, who is, holistic and an extrovert, was suffering that poor. And I was like, this is amazing. And he was like, I need to get out of the house. Poor guy. Yeah. We all vary.
We all vary. And I think that's the goal of social justice in general isn't to sort of switch who's in power. It's to dismantle the power dynamic altogether so that everybody can be supported exactly as they are, instead of there being a right way to be a person and then all these wrong ways to be a person, right? And I love, like, that was one of the things that I loved about Nelson Mandela, is when everything was, when apartheid was coming to an, I hate even saying coming to an end,
because like, no, but like legally dismantled.
Right, there we go. That's the way to phrase it. And people were like, yeah, now we're going to do to them what they did to us. And he's like, no, that defeats the entire purpose of this. And I love that framing, because like, yeah, it does. It's not like we're trying to like put women in power over cis women in power over cis men and other genders now. It's like, no, we just want to dismantle that so that nobody is harmed on either end of that power dynamic. Because right now everybody's being harmed by the power dynamic, including the people in power. So like, let's just stop that. Let's not do that anymore.
And I'm going to go ahead and recommend another book. And that's one that we use as a source in Burnout a lot, which is a book by a moral philosopher named Kate Mann. The book is called Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny. And then her second book follow-up is called Entitled, which is about that very dynamic of like, who's in power and how that structure harms everyone. And wouldn't it be great if we all just decided it was our moral obligation to care for each other, instead of some people giving and some people being entitled to that giving? Kate Mann, she's great.
I could keep nerding out with you for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I appreciate you going over time a few minutes, because it has been so delightful. But Amelia, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to share what you've had to say today with our listeners.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if there's someone in your life who also needs to hear this, be sure to text it to them right now. If you're a pet parent looking for more tips on enrichment, behavior modification, and finding harmony with your pet, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Pet Harmony Training. If you're a behavior training professional dedicated to enrichment for yourself, your clients, and their pets, check us out on TikTok and Instagram at Pet Harmony Pro. As always, links to everything we discussed in this episode are in the show notes. Thank you to Ellen Yoakum for editing this episode and making us sound good. Our intro music is from Penguin Music on Pixabay. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps more pet lovers and professionals find us so they can bring enrichment into their world too. Thank you for listening, and here's to harmony.